It was the summer of 2017 when I moved into a small rental house in rural Pennsylvania. The place was old, a little run down, but cheap, exactly what I needed after a rough breakup. The landlord mentioned it had been vacant for a while, but nothing about the house seemed unusual at first. It had that stale, abandoned smell, and the floors creaked, no matter how carefully I stepped, but it was livable. However, there was one thing that stood out. At the end of the hallway, past my bedroom and the small guest room, there was a door that didn't match the rest. It was old, much older than the others, and painted over so many times that the edges looked almost swollen. When I tried the knob, it didn't budge, locked. I figured it was just a storage closet, and at first I didn't think much of it. The first few nights were uneventful, except for the occasional weird noises, soft creaks and distant knocking sounds. I chalked it up to an old house settling, but by the third night I started noticing something strange. Every time I passed the locked door, I got this overwhelming feeling of being watched. It was irrational, but my body would react before my mind could stop it. My chest would tighten and my pace would quicken until I was safely past it. It didn't help that, late at night, I'd hear faint noises coming from inside. A gentle shifting sound, almost like someone adjusting their position. I told myself it was rodents. What else could it be? One evening, as I was watching TV, I heard a loud thud from down the hall. My stomach dropped. It had come from the locked door. Heart pounding, I forced myself to check. Standing in front of it, I listened closely. Silence. Just as I turned to walk away, I heard something soft, like breathing, not my own, slow, steady breaths just on the other side of the door. I backed away quickly, feeling an icy dread settle over me. The next morning I called my landlord asking about the door. He seemed confused at first, then hesitant. He claimed it was just an old sealed-off storage space and that previous tenants had asked about it too, but it wasn't meant to be opened. The way he said it, almost dismissively, made me uneasy. I didn't push further, but the thought of something, or someone, being behind that door gnawed at me. That night I barely slept. At some point I woke to the sound of soft tapping. My skin prickled as I realized it was coming from the locked door. I lay frozen, staring into the darkness, pulse thudding in my ears. Then the tapping changed. It turned into slow, deliberate knocks. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then silence. Minutes passed, maybe hours, before I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. The following day I made a decision. I needed to know what was behind that door. I searched the house for tools and found a screwdriver. I pried at the edges of the frame, expecting layers of paint and time to fight back. But to my surprise, the door shifted slightly. My breath caught. It wasn't sealed as thoroughly as I thought. Adrenaline surged through me as I worked faster, wedging the screwdriver into the frame and prying it open inch by inch. Then, with a deep groan, the door gave way. The space beyond was small, almost like a hidden closet. Dust filled the air and the smell of mildew was overwhelming. A single, rickety wooden chair sat in the center, facing the wall. The walls themselves were covered in deep scratches, like something or someone had clawed at them over and over. A thick layer of dust coated everything, but the strangest thing was the floor. Despite the dust, there were footprints, fresh, leading from the chair to the door. My breath hitched. A wave of nausea hit me as I backed away, suddenly desperate to get out of the house. I turned sharply, but something made me glance back one last time. The chair had moved. It was slight, maybe just an inch, but I knew it had been in the center before. Now it was closer to the doorway. I ran. I don't remember grabbing my keys, don't remember locking the door behind me. I just drove. I spent the night at a friend's place, trying to convince myself it had been my imagination, that I was just overtired. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had let something out. The next morning I returned to the house, trying to push down the overwhelming dread in my gut. Everything seemed normal at first. The door to the room was still open, just as I had left it, but as I stepped inside, something felt different. The air was heavier, the silence thicker. Then I noticed it. The chair was gone. My heart pounded as I scanned the room, panic setting in. I checked every corner of the house, every room, every closet. The chair had disappeared. I didn't sleep that night. The next day I contacted my landlord again, demanding answers. His voice was quiet, almost guilty. He admitted that years ago, before the room was sealed, a former tenant, a woman, had reported strange occurrences. She claimed to hear knocking, breathing, whispers. One day she simply vanished. The police found no signs of forced entry, no struggle, just an empty house and a single wooden chair placed neatly in the middle of the room. I moved out that same week. I didn't care about breaking the lease. I never looked back. But sometimes when I stay somewhere new, I listen closely at night because every now and then I still hear it. Soft, steady knocking, coming from inside the walls. I never liked driving through the backroads of Ohio at night. There was something unsettling about the endless fields stretching out in every direction, swallowing the world in an ocean of tall grass. The isolation made me uneasy, but sometimes it was the fastest way home. It was late September of 2018, and I was driving back from my cousin's house, exhausted and ready for my own bed. The two-lane road was empty, my headlights the only source of light in the suffocating darkness. The radio had long since lost reception, leaving me alone with the hum of my tires against the pavement. Then I saw him. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. A tall, thin figure stood just off the road, barely illuminated by my headlights. He was motionless, half hidden in the tall grass, his body eerily still. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to tell myself it was just some guy, maybe a farmer checking his land, but something about him wasn't right. His posture was too rigid, too unnatural. His face, what little I could see of it, was expressionless, hollow. I pressed on the gas, wanting to put as much distance between us as possible. My heart pounded as I stole one last glance in the rearview mirror. My breath caught. He had stepped onto the road, not walking, not running, just there, standing in the middle of the lane, staring after me. My hands tightened on the wheel as I sped up, my mind racing. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he needed help, but every instinct in my body screamed at me to keep going. A few miles down the road, I finally exhaled, convincing myself it had just been a trick of the light. Then my headlights caught something up ahead and my stomach twisted in horror. It was him, standing at the edge of the road, completely still. I slammed on the brakes so hard my tires skidded. My entire body went cold. There was no way, no possible way he could have gotten ahead of me. My hands shook as I sat there, paralyzed. He didn't move, didn't react, just watched. The silence in the car was suffocating. My fingers fumbled for my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone. No signal. My mouth was dry, my breathing shallow. Every rational thought told me to turn the car around, to go back the way I came. But some irrational force inside me, a pull, a whisper, urged me forward. I told myself I would just drive past him, not look, not stop. I eased off the brake, the car creeping forward. My pulse thundered as I neared him. His face came into clearer view, illuminated by my high beams. His skin was too pale, almost stretched, his eyes dark voids that swallowed the light. As I passed, I fought the urge to look, but something made me. And then for the first time he moved. His head turned sharply, following me, his mouth parting slightly like he wanted to speak. I didn't wait. I hit the gas, speeding away as fast as my car would allow. My hands were slick with sweat, my breaths ragged. The road blurred past me. My only thought was getting away. Then movement in my rearview mirror. I didn't want to look. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. He was sitting in my back seat. A scream tore from my throat as I swerved violently, nearly losing control. My vision swam as I slammed on the brakes, heart hammering in my chest. My car skidded to a halt in the middle of the empty road. Gasping, I turned around, and there was nothing. The seat was empty. The doors were locked. My mind reeled. Unable to comprehend what had just happened, I sat there gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, trying to steady my breathing. It had to be exhaustion, stress, a hallucination. I forced myself to keep going, promising I'd never take that road again. When I finally pulled into my driveway, relief flooded me. The safety of my home had never felt more precious. I stumbled inside, locking every door and window behind me, but just as I collapsed onto my bed, my phone buzzed. My stomach clenched as I reached for it, dread curling in my gut. A single message, no sender, no number, just one word. Look. My breath hitched. Slowly, my gaze drifted to my bedroom window. My heart stopped. He was standing outside, watching, waiting. It was the fall of 2019 when I took a short-term house-sitting job in rural Montana. The homeowners were an older couple heading to Florida for the winter, and they needed someone to watch their property. An old two-story farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. It seemed like easy money. A peaceful, isolated house, no neighbors for miles, just me and a few chores to keep up with until they returned in spring. I had no reason to hesitate, but if I had known what would happen in that house, I never would have stepped foot inside. The first night was quiet. The house was cold, the floorboards groaned under every step, but nothing unusual happened. I spent most of the evening reading, falling asleep on the couch with the TV on low. Sometime after midnight I woke to a noise, a soft, faint whispering. At first I thought it was the television, but the screen had gone dark, the old set humming in standby mode. The whispering continued, distant and rhythmic, coming from upstairs. A cold unease settled over me, but I convinced myself it was just my imagination. Maybe the wind through an old vent or the house settling. I didn't go upstairs to check. The next day passed without issue. I busied myself with small tasks, feeding the couple's cat, checking the pipes, making sure everything was in order. But something about the house felt off. I couldn't place it exactly, but I felt watched, like someone was always just out of sight. As night fell, the air grew heavier, the silence pressing in like a thick fog. Again I fell asleep on the couch. Again I woke to the whispering. This time it was clearer. Not words I could understand, but something almost melodic, like a hushed conversation happening just out of earshot. My skin crawled. It was coming from the second floor. I forced myself up, heart pounding as I crept toward the staircase. Each step creaked beneath me, the sound deafening in the otherwise silent house. As I reached the top, the whispering stopped. The hallway stretched before me, lined with closed doors. The air was stale, unmoving. I checked each room. Empty, just dusty furniture and forgotten belongings. Then I noticed something strange. One of the guest room doors was cracked open slightly, though I was certain I had left it shut. I hesitated before pushing it open fully. The room was cold, much colder than the rest of the house. My breath fogged in the air. The bed was undisturbed, the rocking chair in the corner completely still. But on the wooden floor something was wrong. The dust had been disturbed, dragged in long sweeping patterns as if something had been pulled across it. A chill shot through me and I backed out of the room quickly, shutting the door hard behind me. I went back downstairs, turned every light on and left them that way for the rest of the night. The next day I called the homeowners, casually asking if they'd ever heard strange noises in the house. They laughed, saying the place was old, that noises were normal. When I mentioned the upstairs room, there was a long pause before the wife spoke, her voice suddenly quieter. She admitted they never used that room. It had belonged to their daughter, but she had passed away decades ago. They kept the door shut out of respect, never touching anything inside. I didn't ask how she had died. That night I locked my bedroom door. I wanted to believe there was a rational explanation for everything. I wanted to believe I was just on edge from being alone, but deep down I knew something was wrong with the house. I barely slept, every small sound making my skin crawl. Then, just as I began to drift off, the whispering started again. This time it was different, closer, right outside my bedroom door. My body went rigid, heart pounding so violently it hurt. The whispering wasn't muffled anymore. It was distinct, sharp, like someone was standing inches from the door, speaking directly against the wood. My breath hitched as I stared at the doorknob, praying it wouldn't turn. But then, slow, deliberate movement. The handle twisted just slightly, rattling against the lock. I wanted to scream, to move, to do anything, but I couldn't. My body refused to respond. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Silence. A thick, suffocating stillness that stretched on endlessly. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, I packed my things. I didn't care about the job, didn't care about the money. I was getting out of that house. As I loaded my bags into the car, I took one last glance at the upstairs window. The curtains were drawn, but behind the glass I saw it, a shadow barely visible, standing completely still, watching me. I never went back. I ignored the homeowners' calls, blocked their number, and did everything I could to forget that house. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it, faint, distant, just outside my door, the whispering. Some places hold memories, and some places refuse to let go of them. Whether it's a locked door hiding something that should never be opened, a figure that appears where it shouldn't, or a house that never truly empties, one thing is certain. Some things are meant to be left undisturbed. If these stories unsettled you, make sure to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more real horror stories. And don't forget to hit the bell icon, because sometimes the scariest things happen when you least expect them.